Genre of action shooters games similar to Tarkov has been gaining popularity in recent years. So many projects are coming out now, but surprisingly, literally all of them turn out to be unnecessary after a month or two. Let's figure out why this is happening, where the genre came from in the first place, and whether we can expect really good action shooters in near future. This is WCFT Studio, and let's begin. Where did all these action shooters come from in the first place? The first one was, of course, Escape From Tarkov, but initially it wasn't convinced that way. The developers of Tarkov had long wanted to create a big game. Back in late 2000s, they were developing Russia 2028, a hardcore survival in the setting of post-apocalyptic Russia, with deep lore and most importantly an open world. Yes, the key here is the open world. There were no transitions between locations planned like in Stalker, and the essence of the game was in atmosphere and exceptional hardcore. But back then, the authors couldn't find a publisher and started paving their way to success through several browser games, including the famous Contract Wars and in 2016 Tarkov. Transitions between locations turned out to be a necessary measure because even small maps sometimes overloaded the computer to the point of blue screens. State games always said they wanted to make a free roam mode where all maps would be stitched into one huge world. It seemed like everything was going in that direction. Many locations in the game have been expanded multiple times, and you can often see the surroundings of neighboring maps from one map. But it turned out to be that the format of entering raid, running through it, looting and exiting turned out to be a random trump card, and simply a formula for success of Escape From Tarkov. Gear selection, sorting items in the stash, searching for something valuable in locations, battle not for life but for death, a bunch of incidents on which the character's life depends, and therefore all his loot, and therefore your hours of grinding and all the emotions. Tarkov provided excitement comparable to a casino. When the popularity of Tarkov began to rapidly grow, people from various genres started coming into the game. Some wanted to loot and fill their stash, others wanted to shoot and take away all the valuable loot with force. In 2018-19, Tarkov began to change significantly to cater a diverse audience, and maintain this popularity. It's hard to say whether it was for better or not. Many veterans, including us, would say that Tarkov lost its soul in its original concept. On the other hand, money came into the game, and BSG had something to further develop the game. First and foremost, the developers tried to retain all this popularity, and besides the flow of content and updates, they often shook the balance, thereby irritating one group of players or another. Different genres, different mechanics, and a constantly malfunctioning balance coexisted awkwardly in the game. Here you have the most realistic weapon customization imaginable, and on the other hand, 2 or 3 meta builds that doesn't need this customization at all. Here you have a realistic oppressive atmosphere of an isolated city and right away a bunch of exclusive rare gear and weapons. On one hand claims of maximum realism and on the other hand RPG progression and constant balance shakes. But these were internal difficulties. Tarkov looked extremely successful and not only players but many developers began to notice it too. The first to grasp the success of the genre was Showdown by Crytek. The game had long been developed as a cooperative third-person shooter and was supposed to resemble Left 4 Dead, but not Tarkov. But in 2016, the project was reformatted into a first-person shooter with a focus on PvPvE, short race sessions, and encounters at the edge of the map. The game entered early access in early 2018. Showdown was the first imitator of Tarkov, and it should be noted, relatively successful. The game had its own concept, lore, mechanics and gameplay. Hunt wasn't just a copycat like most subsequent games in the genre. Thanks to this, it still plays well to this day, and it can be confidently recommended. A bit later, a free-to-play action shooter called Vigor was released on consoles by Czech developer Bohemia Interactive, while on PC the title Frontier was released by German developer Vigor Development. And this is where it all began. Both games were like Tarkov for the little ones, bright visuals, simple and understandable mechanics. Apparently the authors thought that by simplifying the hardcore aspect the game would immediately become more popular, but it turned out to be the opposite. A big problem for many of the followers of Tarkov at that time was the lack of understanding of why Tarkov was so popular, but the formula was simple. However, none of these projects carried any idea or something that could hook players. They were free, with decent visuals and optimization, but isn't gameplay more important, don't you agree? If Vigor was fatally popular on consoles due to the lack of alternatives, the cycle struggled to compete in the PC gaming market, and due to its uninteresting and dull gameplay, the project quickly faded away. It's worth noting that the Vigor is now coming to PC in early access, besides the fact that the game is temporarily paid and suffers from a multitude of technical issues, leading to less than stellar reviews. It's also hard to believe that the project will be able to offer anything to experienced PC gamers. 5 years after the release of Tarkov, up until the end of 2021, the genre practically didn't evolve. Only 3 rather niche games existed. There was a sense of something big emerging, but none of the major publishers had attempted to challenge Tarkov yet, and it's understandable. Experimenting is too risky and expensive for them. Meanwhile, indie developers were just beginning to try the genre. But then the first experiment from a major studio came at the end of 2021. DICE released the Hazard Zone mod for the new Battlefield 2042, and they stumbled over the same pitfalls. It was just a mod, meaning the gameplay wasn't originally tailored to the extraction genre. Moreover, the mod itself only involved running around a huge map and searching for some hard disks. There was nothing interesting or spectacular that the original Battlefield could always offer, and nothing thrilling or intense like what Tarkov offers. This boredom quickly suffocated the mod. A year later, a shooter called Marauders appeared in early access, and here the idea was indeed interesting, an unusual setting of diesel punk where World War II continues, but the scales extends into space. Here, danger lurks both in the raids themselves and when leaving the map on spaceships. Battles can erupt there too. In general, the concept was extremely intriguing. But there was little variety in content, slow development, terrible communication, or rather its absence, a small player base, and therefore even more problems, and most importantly the price, $30 for an unfinished indie game. The 14,000 players at the start of sales soon simply evaporated. The situation somewhat resembles the game Boundary, with wasted potential. Moreover, just about a month and a half later, Call of Duty released the DMZ mode. Not only was the mode free, but it felt like something in between Tarkov and Warzone. It was intriguing overall, with some gameplay and the level design of Call of Duty. It's worth noting that the Tarkov, by the way, seriously popularized tactical gameplay in games. If previously all this correctness wasn't really needed by anyone, now the mass gamers saw their weapons are not just pistols and AKs, but complex mechanisms with a bunch of features. There is a whole range of AK variants, the ability to disassemble and customize favorite weapons down to the barrel, gas block or trigger, the ability to mount multiple sights, different tactical grips, turning what used to be simply called an AK into a work of gun art. Call of Duty picked up on this and made it a trend in 2019, and now it has taken on a whole genre for a new mode. But despite all the detail, liveliness of the game world, events and so on, the mod lacked up one thing: being a game. In our view, if DMZ were a standalone game with a stash, longer and more interesting progression, even more maps and full support, such a project could easily occupy a slightly more casual niche alongside AFT, akin to what Arena Breakout is doing now, but that didn't happen and support for DMZ was discounted. But here other extraction games of various kinds began to appear. While Zero, Sievert or Quasimorph are pretty decent pixelated top-down projects, although they're also single player, they're definitely not competitors to Tarkov. However, all further attempts to grab a piece of the pie in the online FPS genre still remained complete failure. For example, Halt or Extract, another attempt to make a fun Tarkov for the little ones, where at close demonstration the developers couldn't even answer who their target audience was. As a result, this free online game has only 50 players. The same fate befell Hyenas from Sega. An attempt to blend Quake, Overwatch and Tarkov wasn't wanted, and the game was simply cancelled. Although if the developers weren't fixated on extraction mechanics, they might have had something with the finals. The same goes for Scavengers the day before and the others. Well, that sucks. For example, Project Quarantine, which was almost hastily put together from assets, on the contrary, tried to copy Tarkov in almost every aspect, except for transferring the setting to North America and introducing PvE gameplay, and it ended up hitting the mark. Now the game has been renamed to Incursion Red River, changed the setting from America to jungles, designed a beautiful interface, and ordered the tone of advertisement. The shooter itself seems fine, but it's absolutely empty, and yet it has sold about 100,000 copies, totaling costing more than $1 million. Another Let's Call It follower, Grey Zone Warfare, also decided to follow in the footsteps of Tarkov in many ways. It had the same hardcore and punishing gameplay, the same looting mechanics, quite extensive customization, and a highly developed system of injuries and healing. But in addition to that, it featured an open world with very cool exploration mechanics and not so much exits, but evacuations back to base, meaning the entire game all raids happen on one server. The idea was really cool, but the game also turned out to be an empty, and quickly lost a significant portion of its player base. Nevertheless, Red River and Grey Zone showed that developers are starting to understand players need good engaging gameplay, not simplicity where they're treated like fools and led by the hand. Not a world of pink ponies with extraction mechanics. Finally, after 8 years, other developers are starting to understand the essence of Tarkov, the thrill and emotions. Grey Zone alone was bought by over 1 million players and the studio earned over $30 million. It seems that we have now two types of extraction shooters. On one hand, we have abstract attempts to cram genre mechanics into gameplay that objectively doesn't fit. And on the other hand, we have fairly close followers to the original Tarkov, from Grey Zone Warfare to Ghost of Tabor, and even the complete copycat Arena Breakout. All of this reminds me of the Battle Royale story. In one case, developers simply chased the hype without understanding the essence and the value of the genre, resulting in so many objectively poor imitations. In the other case, developers haven't figured out how to diverge further from Tarkov yet. Somewhat there is an open world, somewhere there is a cooperative mode, somewhere there are simplified interfaces and mechanics, but that's for now. Just like with the Battle Royales, it's not necessary to make something perfect right away, it's enough to do better than the competition. Which interesting extraction shooters are worth looking forward to? First off, Beautiful Light seems quite intriguing. We've participated in several closed showcases and have been following the project for a while. It looks like a hand Showdown and SCP teams. There is a modern weaponry, an immersive dark atmosphere, and genuinely engaging gameplay. Players from different teams must locate a laptop at the various points of the map, carefully read instructions, manually input the correct password, and then print out a key card. Next, they search for an entrance to the underground complex, where they power up and open a door. Then they locate an artifact that they must retrieve and use to call for helicopter evacuation. Throughout all this, they may be attacked by strange mutant bots or other players, and gameplay as a monster is also planned. Overall, this seems like a promising concept, and we'll be watching to see what the developers deliver in the end. In the past year, trailers have been released for Exoborne and Marathon. The former will be a sci-fi shooter set in a natural apocalypse scenario, promising vertical gameplay with battles inside tornadoes, storms, lightning, and the like. The latter, Marathon by Bungie, is a revival of the ancient Marathon from 1994, and its design is simply stunning. Among other realistic of sci-fi projects, the new Marathon certainly stands out. There are no details about gameplay yet, so we'll just have to wait for the news. Similar with the Arc Riders from the creators of the Finals, which has been in development. First trailer was shown 2 years ago, but there are still almost no detail available. Unlike the Finals, the game doesn't look particularly unique, and given DICE's experience and now Ember's squandered potential with the Finals, we'll also be keeping an eye on this one. Under the Tiny Build publishing label, Level 0 Extraction is currently in development. It's a dark sci-fi horror shooter with aliens promising a plethora of gadgets and sensors, with monsters able to sense your heartbeat. Perhaps we'll get something akin to the famous Prey or Alien Isolation in the Extraction genre. Lastly, there is a Dead Drop, a game from Dr. Disrespect set in 1980s. It promises violence, quick kills, and vertical gameplay. There is very little information available, with no Steam page for the game yet, and some NFT ideas being thrown into the mix. We'll need to see the gameplay to form a better opinion. And here is the most interesting part of this whole story, a whole new genre, so many games and all, thanks to chance technical limitation. If Escape from Tarkov had succeeded in creating an open world right away, who knows if this genre would have emerged at all. Still ahead of us lie many extraction shooters. Developers are gradually beginning to understand that this genre is specific, hardcore, and thrilling. You can just insert the extraction mechanics into a cute game about ponies, where you don't value your loot and the game doesn't test your nerves. Of course, there will be more than one failed attempt to create something like this, but in the next couple of years we can expect some interesting projects. Which one are you looking forward to? Which extraction shooters have you already played, and which one is your favorite? Let's discuss in the comments. Thank you for watching and see you soon.